Alright, so welcome to Dominion Guilds. So this expansion is only a little bit better than Prosperity in my eyes. It's definitely a small expansion, and even though I have the box here that has both Cornucopia and Guilds in the same box, I do really love Cornucopia, and so it will be higher up on the list. But Guilds, I'm just not a big fan of Guilds. It doesn't help the fact that it's a small expansion, but even though it is a small expansion, Alchemy is a small expansion, and Cornucopia is a small expansion, but I like those a whole lot more. But I'm not a big fan of Guilds on its own. So, let's go over the cards and show you what's in this box for Dominion Guilds. There are some good ones that I really like, but I'm kind of not really interested in most of them. So let's just go over them. So, since it is a small expansion, there are only 2 cards that cost 2 in this expansion. And the first one is Stonemason. Now, I'm kind of in the middle on this card. I don't like it that much, but I can't say I hate it either. So, let's just discuss what this card is. So, you trash a card from your hand, and then you gain 2 cards costing less than it. So, that could be kind of useful. If you trash a powerful card, you could gain 2 cards costing less than that. That's for sure. That could be useful. But if you're using it to just trash, copper or curses or something like that, then, well, you're not going to get anything but copper, obviously. And technically you wouldn't get that anyways, because there's nothing costing less than copper curses anyway. So, it's just a regular trashing card that doesn't give you a benefit if that's all you're trashing anyways. But if you use it to trash a powerful card, you could get something good out of it, So, but here's where it gets interesting. You'll notice that there's a little plus next to the 2, and that's one of the things in this expansion that is fairly unique. This little plus has an additional effect, and it's what it is. It's called the overpay effect. So when you buy something, you can overpay for this card, so you can actually spend more money on the card. So right now it costs 2, but for instance, you can make it cost 3. You could say, I'm going to overpay for it by 1 more, which would be 3 money. Or you can say, I'm going to overpay for it by 2 more money, which would make it 4 money. So you have the option to overpay for it. And that is kind of cool, but it can be kind of confusing for some people to overpay for it. Why would you want to do that? And that depends on the card, too. So what does this do if you overpay for it? Well, let's read what it says. When you buy this, you may overpay for it. If you do, you gain 2 action cards, each costing the amount you overpaid. So, if, for instance, you said you were going to overpay for it by 2, so that would make it 4 money. So that means you could get 2 action cards, each costing the amount you've overpaid, which would be like, obviously, the next one over here, or Stonemason, or Candlestick Maker, because they both cost 2. So you could do that. Is that useful? Maybe. If you want to, maybe perhaps get a bunch of other cards that are cheap. But if you had a lot of extra money and you wanted to get a bunch of the cheaper cards, that could work too. So, but you'd have to overpay for it by a lot. So, let's say you don't want to buy a gold, but you can overpay for it by 4, which would make it basically as much as a gold. But if you overpay for it by 4, then you could gain 2 action cards costing 4. So, that could be useful if you didn't want gold at the time. So, it just depends on your strategy. I've used this card and had some great games with Stonemason, but then I've had some games that weren't that great with Stonemason. So, yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like in the between of, is it good or is it not so great? Then we have the Candlestick Maker. You get an action and you get a buy, and then you take a coin token. Now that's pretty cool. I think I have to say that's pretty cool. I like that card a lot. Now, if you have the new version, it doesn't say take a coin anymore. It just says +1 coffers. I guess a lot of people thought that take a coin token was a little confusing. Now, I don't know why that would be. I don't have any, there's no confusion for me, take a coin token. It's just simple. Take a coin token. How is that confusing? I don't understand. And then when they made it +1 coffers, well, that was actually a little confusing to me, because I'm like, I go from take a coin token to +1 coffers. So it took me a little while to really get used to it. It wasn't until Renaissance came out that I really understood the whole point of +1 coffers. So, yeah, but since we have the original, we're sticking with the original. So take a coin token. Pretty simple. You just take a coin token, you can use it and save it for later, like an additional treasure to use later. You know, instead of having all those useless coppers, unless you have a good copper strategy in the game. Then we have the Doctor, and it's an interesting way of trashing cards, but it's not my favorite card. It's kind of so-so in my book. And that's another 3+er, so it's another one of those cards with the 3+ on it. But it's not that, well, let's just go over it anyways. It's a small expansion. Let's make this 2 videos just because there are some interesting things you can do with the overpay. So, first of all, let's do the action part of the card. Name a card. So let's just continue. Reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Trash the matches, put the rest back on top in any order. So let's say you name Copper. Well, you'd reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. If they were coppers, they'd get trashed. If they weren't, they'd just go back on top in any order. So you can only trash one type of card. You have to name it, and there's no guarantee that the cards you call out will be revealed. So if you wanted to get rid of some pesky curses or something like that, you would have to obviously have called that out, and it would had to have been the top 3 cards, obviously. So, is it good? Well, maybe slightly better than Chapel, but only because it's a different way of trashing the cards. So, then, let's go over what the overpay does for this card. So when you buy this, you may overpay for it. For each 1 treasure you overpaid, look at the top card of your deck, trash it, discard it, or put it back. So, I mean, that's kind of basic. It's an alternative way of maybe trashing some coppers or some curses, and at least with this option of overpaying for it by an extra treasure, you don't have to call out a particular card, and it gives you the option of discarding them, putting them back, or trashing the cards. So if you overpaid for it by 3, then that would be just like revealing the top 3, except in this case you get the option of discarding or putting back and trashing those cards. So that's pretty cool, but once again, it's not the best. Okay, and we have one more card here costing 3. Masterpiece. Well, it's worth a treasure on its own. And then when you buy this, you may overpay for it. If you do, gain a silver per treasure you overpaid. Now that is actually kind of useful. Although you don't want to get too many silvers. Golds are a whole lot better than silver, but, you know, it just depends on your strategy, I suppose. It's definitely good to have a couple extra silvers, for sure. So if you had 5 money, and you had this in play, and, or should I say, when you have 5 money, you overpay for this, you could get a couple of silvers with the masterpiece, is what it means. So you buy this card, you overpay for it by 2, which would make it 5. But since you overpaid for it by 2, you would get 2 silvers, because that's how much you overpaid for it. So that's actually pretty cool. I like that card, but it's not my favorite. It's definitely not my favorite card. So, okay, so that's all of the 2s and the 3s in this expansion. So see, not very many of those cards. Then we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 cards that cost 4 in this expansion. Let's get started and go over some of them now. So the first one we have here is the Taxman. This is an attack card, but as far as attack cards go, it's not necessarily my favorite attack card. So you may trash a treasure from your hand. Each other player with 5 or more cards in hand discards a copy of it, or reveals a hand without it, and then gain a treasure card costing up to 3 more than the trashed card, putting it on top of your deck. So this is kind of like an attack mine, sort of, because you, first of all, can trash a treasure from your hand. Let's say it's a copper. Then each other player with 5 or more cards in hand discards a copy of it. So if they have a copper, then they would discard the copy of it, and then you would gain costing a card costing 3 more than it, hence silver. And then you get to put the silver on top of your deck. But unlike mine, which would let you put it back into your hand, this is going to the top of your deck. So it's slightly better than just simply putting it into the discard pile, your new silver, I mean. But playing this card means you don't get any benefit now. It's not until your next turn that you'll get that silver. So, now I've had turns where I was able to do it with a silver, trash a silver, gain a gold, put that on top of my deck. Then somebody in their hand, if they had silver, they'd have to discard it. But in the end, it's not really the best attack card out there, for sure. Definitely not my favorite either. So once again, this is a card I'm sort of so-so on. Not really that great, but not hated either. Alright, so we'll continue where we left off in the next video.